Bricklayer feeds black twin sisters without knowing that their father is a billionaire and owner of the work. The sound of jackhammers and hammers filled the air like a chaotic orchestra of routine. It was another bright, sunny day at the construction site, and Raoul, a bricklayer hardened by time and bills, stepped aside for a moment to sit in the shade of a cracked wall. In the warmth of the cement, he opened the old aluminum lunchbox. Rice, beans, fried eggs, and a little farofa prepared with care by his wife early in the morning. It was simple, but that was all. But that day, something was different. Right there, leaning discreetly against the corner of the wall, two girls watched in silence. What must they have? 8 years? No one had noticed them. No one even commented. They were there with shabby dresses and sunken eyes that did not match their age. But what caught Raoul's attention the most was the look. It wasn't curiosity, it was hunger. Who were those girls? Why were they there alone? Why did they seem invisible to everyone else? Raoul frowned, looked around. Nothing. No adults around. No sign of toys, lunchboxes, not even a small bottle of water. Instinct spoke louder than doubt. He broke his lunch, box in half without hesitation, and held it out to them as if offering a part of his own day. They looked at each other for a second, as if asking permission in silence. And then, with the delicacy of someone who is afraid to make noise in the world, they accepted. They sat down near him, still without saying a word, and ate every spoonful as if it were a feast. Who does this nowadays? Who would notice them? Would you notice? Raoul asked no questions. He didn't want to know where they came from or why they were there. He just acted. In his own way, it was as if to say, "Today, you don't go hungry near me." But what he didn't know? It's just that that gesture, apparently small, was being observed, and that those two girls carried a secret capable of turning the world upside down. Now think about it. If an ordinary man with so little can offer so much, what does that say about those who have everything and see no one? And before the day ends, Raoul will still see that sharing food. It may be just the beginning of a miracle that he doesn't even imagine he is experiencing. The next day, Raoul did what many would not do: put a little more rice in the lunchbox. He separated 2 bananas and carefully picked up a piece of the cornmeal cake that his wife had made. She asked, with that curious look of someone who already knows her husband's heart, "Who is this all for, Raoul?" He just smiled and replied, "It's for some little ones who showed up yesterday at the work. I think they liked the farofa, and they came back. Same time, same corner of the wall, same hunger disguised by hopeful eyes." Raoul was no longer surprised. That silent ritual had become the most human point of his day. They didn't talk much, but the smiles, they said more than any words. They sat nearby, thanked them with their eyes, and shared it among themselves as if it were treasure. Who were those girls? Where were the adults who were supposed to protect them? Why did only Mr. Raoul seem to see them? On the 3rd visit, one of them, with her hands still dirty with dust, took a piece of folded paper from inside a bag. Raoul opened slowly. It was a drawing made with colored pencils. 2 little dolls in dresses next to a man with a yellow hat. Below, in crooked letters, the phrase, "Thank you for seeing us." Raoul froze. That wasn't just a drawing. It was a sweet cry coming from a place where no one looks. It was a thank you from someone who goes unnoticed every day. He kept the paper in his overalls pocket, as if he were guarding a piece of gold. And since then, he has started to wait for them. I didn't know the girls' names. I didn't know where they came from. But he knew that somehow they were now part of his life. Have you ever been seen for real? Have you ever felt the weight and relief of being recognized when the whole world seems too busy? Raoul felt it, and without realizing it, he made a mute promise between them. As long as they appeared on that wall, he would bring food, be careful, and presents. Not to be a hero, but because he knew deep down that no one survives being invisible for long. But what Raoul could not yet imagine, it was the real reason behind that silence. Because sometimes, what is not said, it speaks louder than any scream. On that sultry afternoon, While collecting the rest of the debris from the courtyard, Raoul saw the girls run behind the wall in a hurry than usual. They were agitated, with frightened eyes. Soon after, a well-dressed woman, high heels jammed on the dirt, appeared calling names impatiently. "Livia! Luna! Where have you gotten yourself into now?" Raoul stopped. Noted. She seemed more concerned about the dirt on her dress than the whereabouts of the children. A security guard also prowled the area, talking on the radio, as if he was looking for something valuable that had been misplaced. Minutes later, the girls returned, panting. Raoul didn't ask, but one of them, the smaller one, blurted out. With a low voice and eyes on the floor, "We just wanted to disappear a little." That's when he understood they were not lost. They were running away, not from the city, not from external danger, but from inside their own house. From the coldness of an environment where presence does not mean affection, where adults are around, but hearts too far. In that bed of concrete, mud, and dust, the bricklayer with calloused hands was the only one to extend something more valuable than toys or tablets: true attention. While the elite built mansions around it, the daughters of luxury preferred the construction floor, the sound of tools, and the mute conversation of a simple man who knew how to hear with his eyes. Can you imagine what goes on in the heart of a child who flees not from monsters, but from indifference? Raoul began to notice the details. The girl's clothes were expensive but always wrinkled, her hair beautiful but poorly cared for, and the questions. "Mr. Raoul, why do you always look at us? Do you have children? Do they like you?" They didn't want toys. They wanted someone who could truly see them, and in that moment Raoul felt a mixture of compassion and anger. Anger not at them, but at the world around them. As someone with so much, could you offer so little? But he didn't yet know that this chasm between worlds, between concrete and roof, was about to crumble. Because when the truth comes out, even the tallest walls can collapse. The next morning, even before the whistle blew the work, Raoul already had the reinforced lunchbox in his hands and a packet of coconut candies wrapped with a napkin, a gift from his wife, who was already beginning to suspect that those girls had become part of her husband's daily life. But when he got close to the wall, before he even saw the girls, he heard the laughter. "Look at the father of the preppy girls. Have you bought diapers for Madam's daughters, Raoul? You must be trying to get an inheritance, right? You never know." The co-workers laughed like someone who makes a cheap joke without knowing the pain it carries. Raoul did not answer, but his silence was louder than any expletive. He felt it, in the throat, in the stomach, in the chest. Those words were like invisible hammer blows, not because they were true, but because they revealed the kind of world he lived in. A world where kindness becomes a source of distrust, and empathy is mistaken for interest. But even so, he walked up to the wall. He sat in the same place as always, and as if nothing had happened, she shared her lunchbox with the girls who that day arrived a little more shy. Why does it hurt so much when the judgment comes from those who know nothing? The world seems intolerant of what it does not understand. A bricklayer taking care of two well-dressed girls did not fit any acceptable logic. So they mocked. Because laughing is easier than feeling, more comfortable than questioning. But Raoul knew. I knew that those children didn't need toys. They needed someone who wouldn't give up on them, even when everyone around them laughed or pointed fingers. And there, among the remains of concrete and gravel, he made a choice. He would continue to be the one he saw, even if the others preferred to close their eyes. But what he didn't know yet, it's just that someone far more powerful than any mocking worker, was also beginning to see. And when that someone found out everything, the laughter would cease, and the tables were going to turn. The noise of the concrete mixers was interrupted by the deep roar of an imported engine. A shiny black SUV with tinted windows and chrome wheels braked sharply in front of the construction site. The dust hadn't even settled when the car door slammed open. Out of the inside came a man in an expensive suit, but his jacket was unbuttoned, his tie crooked, his face sweaty and distressed. He didn't look like a visiting executive. He looked like a desperate father. "Livia! Luna!" he shouted, his voice breaking. All the workers stopped. Some lowered their helmets. Silence settled like a heavy blanket over the hot concrete. Raul stood up slowly. I didn't understand what was happening until he saw, next to him, two little heads emerge from behind the wall. It was as if their name had pulled an invisible string. The girls looked at the man. For a moment they hesitated, and then ran. They ran as if they wanted to reach the world again. The man knelt down, hugged them both tightly, tears flowing, mixed with the dust of the road. "Thank God, I found you." But before any other gesture was made, something unexpected happened. The two turned around at the same time, and still hugging their father, they pointed to Raul. With the purity of someone who does not measure people's worth by clothes, power, or status, one of them said. "He took care of us," the other added. "He saw us." It was as if that moment froze time. The billionaire, yes, him, who owns the land, the trucks, the millionaire contracts, looked at Raul, as if he were seeing someone for the first time. Eyes met, and for the first time in years, the rich man found himself small in front of someone bigger. Raul stood still, hands dirty with lime, with the lunchbox still open on the inverted bucket. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The truth, at that moment, did not need speeches. Two girls had just revealed in front of everyone who had really made a difference in their lives. And it wasn't the nanny. It wasn't the security guard. It wasn't the driver. It was him, the invisible bricklayer. And now, no one could pretend they didn't know anymore. But what would happen after this meeting? How would a man used to being served react? When he realized that the greatest gesture of love for his daughters did not come from those who he paid, but from those who simply cared. What's next? It does not fit in the heart of those who are not ready to change. But Raul was about to be called for something much bigger than just erecting walls. The billionaire stood up, still with his daughters clinging to his legs. He took a deep breath. The dust of the work stuck to his suit as if to remind him of where he was. His eyes, still teary, did not leave Raul. A simple man, with worn boots and hands cracked with lime. A man who, without knowing who those girls were, chose to see them. He walked to Raul, and for a moment, no one moved. The entire construction site seemed to be waiting for a verdict. Then, in a scene that no one there would ever imagine seeing, the billionaire stopped in front of the bricklayer and held out his hand. But Raul didn't move. Instead, he surreptitiously wiped the dirty palm on the side of his overalls and said in a low, firm voice, "You don't need to thank me, sir. I did what everyone else was supposed to do." The man swallowed. The outstretched hand turned into a hug, a silent hug. No pose, no audience, no marketing pose. A gesture that has collapsed the invisible walls that separate those who have everything of those who have essence. The twins joined the two, hugging Raul tightly. And that's when the smiles turned into tears contained in the eyes of the workers around, those same colleagues who had mocked days ago. Now they couldn't face Raul. One by one they lowered their heads, not out of shame about him, but out of shame of themselves. Because sometimes the biggest lesson comes not from those who speak loudly, but of those who act in silence. The billionaire tried to insist, "I can give you something, a gift, money, work, anything." But Raul shook his head and with a slight smile replied, "The only things I've won are here." And he pointed to the drawing the girls had made days before, now neatly folded into the pocket of his overalls. At that moment, respect did not need to be announced. He was there, pure, unquestionable. And while everyone was still trying to understand the strength of what they saw, no one imagined that this meeting would be just the beginning of a much bigger change. Because when a simple gesture breaks a cycle of invisibility, it doesn't stop there. It ignites something that transforms structures. And Raul? Raul was about to build something that cannot be measured in bricks, eh? Days later, the noises of the construction site remained the same. The sound of concrete, cranes, nails, and instructions shouted from above. But there was something different in the air. An atmosphere of attention, listening, of silent reverence for a man who, until recently, was just another worker. The billionaire returned to the construction site, but this time, he did not come in a suit. He wore jeans, a simple shirt, and he carried a project under his arm. Literally, he called a meeting in the central shed of the work. All employees were summoned, engineers, electricians, foremen, and assistants. When the crowd fell silent, he climbed onto a makeshift pallet, holding a plasticized A4 sheet, and he said, "That drawing, it changed my life. It was the girl's drawing, 2 little dolls in dresses and a man in a hat. Below the sentence, 'Thank you for seeing us.'" He took a deep breath and continued, "For years I invested millions in concrete, steel, and glass. But only now have I realized that what really builds a company, it is seeing people, real people. Therefore, today the View Agente project is born here." Murmurs echoed, eyes crossed. "And who will lead this project? He is the man who taught me the most about humanity with a simple lunchbox. Raul, come up here." A deep silence took over the room. Raul hesitated, sweated cold, looked to the sides as if looking for a way out. But then she felt 2 small hands pushing against her back. The twins were there, and smile as if to say, "Go, we're with you." Raul went up. With his crumpled cap in his hands, eyes lowered and his heart beating like a sledgehammer, he stood in front of dozens of colleagues. Some still had the marks of shame in their eyes. "I'm not a speaker, not even a doctor in anything. I just know that no one deserves to go through life without being seen. And if I can teach you something here, that's going to be it." Shy applause. Then, stronger. And finally, a standing ovation. The View Agente project started there. Small, but with a giant purpose. To train the company's employees to recognize the value of each human being. From the intern to the gate security. From the worker to the children of the bosses themselves. Courses were created. Conversation circles. Workshops with themes such as active listening, intergenerational respect, and empathy in the workplace. And Raul, with his simple speech and honest look, was the leader, not by diploma, but by legacy. Now the work erected more than buildings. She began to build people, and no one imagined that the most important brick would still be laid by 2 small hands. Because the last gesture of this story was yet to come. It was a clear morning, with the sky so blue that it looked like it had been painted by hand. In the heart of the EA construction site, where there had previously been only dust and cement, now stood something new. A small social center with large windows, colorful walls, and a golden plaque at the entrance. Humanization Center. View Agente, Project Flowers. In the flower beds, chairs lined up. Employees gathered with curious looks. Among those present were engineers in suits, workers dirty with lime, local journalists, and entire families. At the heart of it all, Raul. Wearing a shirt ironed by his wife and clean boots for the first time in years, he watched the red ribbon. That sealed the entrance. But there was a detail. He didn't want to go up. With trembling hands, he looked at the ground as if looking for an excuse to retreat. "That's not for me," he thought. "I'm just a bricklayer." It was then that he felt it. 2 warm little hands holding his fingers, the twins, of simple dresses but with the brightness of someone who knows the truth that the world tried to ignore. And one of them said, in a firm whisper, "We want you to open it." It was like a snap, as if all the voices that had diminished him for years had been silenced by a single sentence. Raul nodded with a slight lump in his throat. He walked slowly to the tape. He picked up the ceremonial scissors with hands that until then only knew pliers and hose. The girls stood by her side, one on each side, holding her hands. He closed his eyes for a second. He cut the ribbon, and when the metallic sound of the blades was heard, what came next was overwhelming. Applause. Many, long, genuine. Some clapped, their hands hard. Others discreetly cleaned their eyes. Among them, the colleagues who had previously mocked, the engineers who barely noticed him. Even the billionaire standing among the guests put his hands to his face, moved. Raoul didn't say anything. He just smiled. A shy smile, the kind that doesn't need to be photographed to be eternal. Because at that moment, what was being cut was not just a tape. It was the last thread of invisibility that separated him from the recognition he always deserved. And at the end, when everyone approached to greet him, it was the drawing. That first drawing of the girls with the phrase, "Thank you for seeing," that gained a place of honor, framed, hanging at the entrance to the center. There, everyone could see, everyone could remember. And Raoul returned home that night lighter. Because finally, he had discovered that you don't have to be big to change the world. We just have to see who the world insists on ignoring. And sometimes it all starts with a shared lunchbox. In a world where so many pass in a hurry, where the eyes see but do not see, where the noise of achievements drowns out the silence of those who just want to be noticed. Raoul reminds us of something simple but revolutionary. Seeing someone is an act of love. He didn't have much. He had no titles, no followers, no great speeches, but he had what many missed: presence. The girls weren't just hungry for food, they were hungry for affection, for attention, for a look that said, "You matter." And how many people do you cross every day? And don't you see, sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes at all. They wear worn-out boots, calloused hands, and a heart where the world fits. If this story touched you, share it now with someone who needs to be seen. Mark that friend who has a heart like your and he comments below, "I saw it," to show that you are not part of those who turn their faces. You are part of those who see. And if you want to know other transformation stories like this, click on the next video. Because sometimes a lunchbox changes destinies, and the next heart touched, it may be yours.